Welcome to this Several9's webinar. In this webinar, we're going to discuss Cluster Control Operations Center and how it can simplify your cluster control deployments at scale. My name is Divine Odazie. I'm a technology evangelist at Several9's, and also I'm a certified Kubernetes application developer and an AWS solution architect. We are going to start this webinar by discussing the need for Cluster Control Operations Center. After that, I will introduce you to Cluster Controls Operations Center, then walk you through its installation features, and then we'll end with some frequently asked questions and some closing remarks. The need for Cluster Control Operations Center. A single cluster control instance is capable of comfortably managing up to 200 to 300 database nodes, and that is our general recommendation depending on your server hardware. However, as you scale your database clusters, you will outgrow your single cluster control instance performance parameters and need to add additional controllers. Large environments lead to the need for multiple cluster control instances, with each handling a part or partition of your total environment. For example, one of our customers, banking customers, Absa, was able to build their own sovereign DBaaS handling 3,000 plus database nodes and multiple user groups thanks to Cluster Control Operations Center. But workload performance may not be the only reason you want to scale your cluster control instances. There are additional benefits including workload customization, security isolation, unique performance requirements, and granular access control, also compliance benefits. Implementing a single interface to administer multiple or multi-tenant cluster control solution helps you avoid operational bottleneck you face when managing multiple cluster control controllers, hence the Cluster Control Operations Center. The Cluster Control Operations Center, CCOPC, is a platform designed to simplify and enhance the management of database clusters across multiple cluster control instances, also called cluster controllers. With CC Operations Center, you can seamlessly increase your operational capacity to handle growing workload demands by consolidating controllers under one administrative panel. As a single pane of glass for all your controllers, you get instant insight into controller, database, node, and performance status. Also, alarms, backups, and ongoing jobs. This allows you to take action to resolve issues in specific controllers and database clusters from one dashboard. Installation, which I'll walk you through in a moment, is quick and easy, taking under 5 minutes. And of course, the responsive 24/7 global support you are used to is also included. Now, let's take a quick look at the architecture that makes this possible. Cluster Control Ops sits on top of your existing cluster control environment. As you can see in the architectural diagram, Ops is managing 1, 2, and n amount of cluster control instances. You can view each instance deployment, metrics, perform cluster and node actions, manage users, generate reports right from the CC Ops dashboard. The cluster control experience you are used to hasn't changed. You can still access each controller individually as you normally would, and DevOps engineers can use the S9S CLI or the cluster controls Terraform provider to manage database provisioning, deployment, and day 2 operations. Now that we understand the architecture, let's quickly look at Ops's key features. Centralized management is one of the key features which I've already emphasized. Opsi gives you a central web application and integrated controller dashboard so you can audit, manage multiple cluster control controllers through a single user-friendly pane of glass instead of having to log into each controller or building your own bespoke solution. Horizontal scaling. Opsi makes it trivial to expand your database estate capacity to handle growing workload demands simply by adding controllers on the fly right from the console. Multi-tenancy, you can give different teams, departments their own isolated environment, resources, database clusters, configurations, ensuring security and compliance. LDAP authentication. You can easily integrate cluster controls OPC into your existing user authentication workflows. And don't forget, this sits on top of your cluster control instances, so all CC features are actionable from here. Okay, guys, it's demo time. Let's go to the demo. Cluster Control Operations Center can be set up in 3 steps. In this part of the webinar, I will show you how to first install a cluster control instance, then OPC, and lastly, how to add your controllers and what the panel experience looks like. For this demo, I'm going to be deploying Cluster Control Operations Center on an Ubuntu Linux distribution. So this distribution is deployed on DigitalOcean. Every step I'm going to walk you through in this Operation Center installation can be found in the Cluster Control documentation. So if you recall, I mentioned the first step is to install Cluster Control, then install OPC. So first, let's install Cluster Control. So I download the Cluster Control installation script. Then I make the script executable. And after that, I run sudo install. Answer this question: do I want to send diagnostics data of this installation to server 9s? I'll say yes. My SQL root password for the Simon DB. So I will just say test. The Simon user password test2 test. Then after a few minutes, Cluster Control will be installed on this Linux distribution. The next step is to install the Cluster Control Operations Center. Before we go ahead to install OPC, you should note that there is no dependency for the Apache server in the Cluster Control Operations Center, and the web application is served via the Simon proxy process instead. So within our existing cluster control installation, the installation we just went through now, the Apache server and the CCV2 UI can be completely uninstalled prior to installing Cluster Control Operations Center. Now let's install the Cluster Control Operations Center. Seeing this is a Debian Ubuntu distribution, we're going to use the apt package manager. So I'll copy the command from the documentation. So this command installs 2 additional packages. So the cluster control MCC multi-controller package, and also the cluster control proxy package. So the cluster control proxy package provides controller proxying service for Cluster Control Operations Center, and the cluster control multi-controller package is what offers the centralized management of multiple control instances deployed on any environment. So we'll say yes, and after a few seconds, Cluster Control Operations Center will be installed. The next step is to register the local Simon controller for Cluster Control OPC that we just installed. So we'll do that using the Cluster Control Manager admin CLI tool. So we'll just copy the command from the documentation. So this command enables us to access Cluster Control Operations Manager via this port 19052. So after running the command, we'll see a prompt to please restart the Simon proxy service to apply the changes. So we'll restart the Simon proxy service using the system ctl command, system ctl restart Simon proxy service. And after that, we'll be able to access Cluster Control Operations Center via the port 19052 of the IP address. But then again, just like a regular cluster control installation, you can also configure a domain name or a subdomain name for your cluster control operations center environment. I will now head over to the browser. In the browser, I'll paste the URL, and just like your regular cluster control installation, you'll be required to sign a self-signed TLS certificate. So I will sign this, and after a few seconds, we'll be met with a registration interface. If you already have a cluster control user for your existing cluster control installation, you'll be met with a login interface, and you can just log on to Cluster Control Operations Center. After logging into the Cluster Control Operations Center, to add a cluster control instance, we'll go to Manage Controller, then click on Add New Controller. So here you can see a prompt, step-by-step guide on how to add a new controller. So I have some controllers with already pre-existing clusters I want to add for this demo. So I will just name the first controller Webinar Demo Controller 1. Then add the front-end URL of the controller. So I'll just copy the front-end URL for the first controller, then next. Then you see that you have the ability to authenticate with LDAP. But for this, I want to authenticate with a demo username and password I set for the controller. So the username is DODAZIE, password is test, and I can test the connection. And I get, okay, connection success means that I can now add this controller to the operations center interface. Then after a few seconds, you'll see that the webinar demo controller 1 has been added. So let me go ahead and add another controller that I prepared for this demo. So same steps. So I'll name it webinar controller 2, webinar demo controller 2, copy the front end URL, same password, username and password. I test the connection success. Then I currently have two controllers added. After adding these two controllers, so I can go to the general overview, and I will see a comprehensive overview of the database clusters in the two controllers. So I can see the first cluster, Jacob Rig Alpha DB1, is on the webinar demo controller 1. I can see the next cluster, then I can see the other two clusters that are deployed with the second cluster control instance. So this gives you comprehensive overview of your database clusters, and you can also add more cluster control instances, and you have more overview on the database clusters. And you can see this alarm, license expiration. This alarm is peculiar to the webinar demo controller 1. And you can also see audit logs. You can see that a day ago, I generated an error report for this demo controller 1. And you can see all the nodes. So cumulatively, the two cluster control instances have about 13 nodes, and you can see all the nodes are healthy. If there be any failed node, you will see that the node will show in this failed status, and you can see backups. So I have currently have some backups mission schedule. You can see jobs that have been completed. So these are jobs that I created before in preparation for this demo. So this give you a single pane of glass across database clusters in your database in your cluster control environment wherever they be deployed. So I can also go into each of this cluster. As you can see, I can select a controller. So this is webinar demo controller 1, and I can just look at just those clusters for the particular controller, and I can see there are only 3 clusters in this particular controller. Then I can also select the second controller, and I will see that, okay, there are two clusters in this second controller. And you can see here that, okay, this particular cluster controller using a free license, and the license would soon expire. I can also add a new license directly from this cluster control operation center interface. If you recall, at the start of this webinar, we discussed how directly from the cluster control operations center, you can perform actions in your database controller on a particular database, on a particular cluster control instance deployed wherever you have it, whether be on-prem, on the cloud, or in a connected environment. To show you that, I will go to this webinar demo controller one. So I have a cluster that has been existing for a few days. So this Jacob rig. So, and this cluster, you can view the cluster topology. So it's a two-node cluster with a primary node and a replica node. We can also view this from this drop down on the operation center interface. So I will go into this particular cluster, and I can also see the dashboard. I can see PostgreSQL metrics just as you see in your regular cluster control. But now you don't have to log into the particular cluster control environment. You can just view this from the operation center interface. You can look at system metrics and view the operating system and the cores and the RAM, total RAM. And this database has been existing for more than 2 weeks. So this gives you kind of a single pane of glass, both from cluster control instance perspective down to a database server perspective. So you have observability just from one interface. So you can also look at the nodes. So like I mentioned, this is a two-node topology cluster. So one primary node and one replica node with Prometheus deployed for metrics. And you can also look at the performance, DB growth, just as every feature the features you're already familiar with regular cluster control. And also backups. I can create a backup, create an on-demand backup now, and leave demo configurations, store on the controller, and you see that a job will be created as it would be in your normal cluster control environment. And we can look at that job and say creating a backup. And after a few minutes, you see that the backup will be created. You can also look at logs. You can also look at reports. So this is a report I created about a day ago for this particular environment and for this particular database cluster. And you can also edit some configuration just as you normally would. So now you're going from having general overview of your entire database infrastructure, of all the clusters deployed in your database infrastructure managed by a specific cluster control instance, and going down deep into a particular instance and looking at a particular database cluster and its configuration and features. So this gives you a single pane of glass, and as you grow, have multiple environments, multiple database instances, multiple cluster control instances, you get that single pane of glass and have control over your database infrastructure. With that, we have come to the end of this demo, showing you how Cluster Control Operations Center can simplify and enhance the administration of database clusters across multiple cluster control instances, just from a single interface. Now that you've seen how easy it is to get up and running and interact with Cluster Control Operations Center, let's look at some frequently asked questions. So the first question we get is, does Cluster Control Operations Center require an additional license? No, that is because Cluster Control Operations Center is included in Cluster Control's enterprise plan. So as an organization, you're already using Cluster Control on an enterprise plan, you can just install Cluster Control Operations Center and use your license and get all these features that I just walk you through. Then the next question is, what is the Cluster Control multi-controller package? So just like I mentioned during the demo, or during installation of Cluster Control Operations Center, the multi-controller package is a package that provides centralized management of multiple cluster control instances. Then the next question is, What is cluster control proxy? The cluster control proxy provides proxying service for cluster control operations center. Then the next question is, what happens if I use one cluster control installation to manage, let's say, I talked about at the beginning, we talked about uh, comfortably cluster control, a single cluster control instance comfortably managing 200 to 300 nodes. So what happens if you go above 300 nodes? So we recommend 200 to 300 nodes due to the limitation of our controller architecture using the agentless access with SSH, which has its own trade-off with large amount of nodes. So it's advisable to not max out more than 200, 300 nodes so you can have seamless experience when deploying database clusters. In wrapping up, let's look at some key aspects of Cluster Control Operations Center. So with Cluster Control Operations Center, like we mentioned, you can easily scale your cluster control installation beyond a single installation to any multiple amount of installation handling thousands of nodes. And also, Cluster Control Operations Center helps you to expand your team capabilities by implementing an internal DBaaS, right, with its multi-tenancy features, giving you also the ability to take control and take action of your database clusters with the cluster control features you're already familiar with, so you don't have to manually log into each cluster control instance in order to perform actions. If you want to try out Opsi, you can reach out to us via mail, sales@severalnines.com, or Twitter @severalnines, and also LinkedIn severalnines. You can also scan this QR code on the right, which takes you to the Cluster Control Operations Center documentation, and try it out for yourself. I hope this webinar was helpful and impactful, and do well to reach out to us to learn more about cluster control.